Hi everybody, welcome back to lesson 10 of Miss Ellis's at home learning, or learning at home with Miss Ellis. I don't know, I haven't figured out how to call this yet. This is all still getting made as we go here. So this is the 10th lesson, the third in this mini unit about the three pigs with two more to follow. So we're right in the middle of our Three Little Pigs unit. So we're going to start, as we always do, by thinking about genre and building background. So let's remind ourselves that we are reading fairy tales, right? So these are the stories, or folk tales. These are the stories that we've told over and over and over again for years. It's passed down from generation to generation. And what's happening in the versions we're reading today is that these authors have taken this story that we all know very, very well, and they've sort of flipped it around and they've found elements to change. So we are focused on looking at the elements of these stories and what authors have changed to make the story different and interesting. So let's start by activating our background knowledge, our prior knowledge. So kiddos, turn to somebody next to you and retell this story. The true story of the Three Little Pigs, whether or not you agree, whether or not you believe the wolf. Just get your brain ready by thinking about what we read last time. So pause if you're still talking. We're going to move on to the new book. So this story flipped the sort of good guy, bad guy, innocent, guilty idea. The materials were the same, the character was the same, the setting was the same, but the ending was different too. So let's read a new one today where there's a little bit more change going on. So this is The Three Little Fish and the Big Bad Shark. So if you think about that chart we started, what might be different? Character, setting, materials, language, and the ending. So let's read, and then your job as a family is going to be to fill that in for this text. So I need to turn this more so that you can see better. Here we go. The Three Little Fish and the Big Bad Shark. Now you can tell how popular this book is in my classroom. It is mangled. It is folded and bent and ripped, but it is so loved it has been read 1 billion times. The Three Little Fish and the Big Bad Shark. Now I'm going to show you every page of this book because the author and illustrator have decided to fill every page with illustrations. The Three Little Fish and the Big Bad Shark. Look at this. Full page illustration without any words yet. So you can usually pick up some clues about your setting or your characters just by looking at these illustrations. The Three Little Fish and the... Guess what it's going to say on the next page? You got it. Big Bad Shark by Ken Geist, illustrated by Julia Gordon. Once upon a time, there's that beginning that we hear in fairy tales all the time. Once upon a time, there lived a mama fish and her three little fish, Jim, Tim, and Kim. It's now time, said the mama, for each of you to make a home in the deep blue sea. So off they went. The first little fish, named Jim, swam away and met a seahorse playing in some seaweed. Can I have some of the seaweed so I can build a house? Take as much as you can carry, said the seahorse. Jim gathered the seaweed and made a weedy little house. Now, most of the stories we've read so far, what did that first little pig actually build its house out of? Straw, right? So take a second. Sorry, I'm getting cold. Take a second and talk about why didn't they use straw in this story? Pause here. So now you've had the chance to talk about that, why they didn't use straw. So I bet you figured out that because we're talking about fish and the setting is, it's the ocean now. So because it's fish in the ocean, that means that they really probably wouldn't have access to straw, but they would have access to a lot of seaweed. So it seems like it was a good choice to choose something they would actually find in their habitat in that setting. Well, if the first fish used seaweed, I wonder if you're already starting to think about what the other fish might use to build their houses. Let's find out. Jim had just finished building his seaweed house when he heard the big bad shark knocking at the door. Now remember that language we repeated over and over. Let's see if this author used that language or changed it. Little fish, let me come in. The little fish trembled and replied, not by the skin of my finny fin. Then I'll munch and I'll crunch and I'll smash your house down. Oh, you smash your house in, roared the shark. Turn and talk very quickly. Pause here. What has the author changed if you're thinking about those 5 elements of the story? So now you've talked together what of the 5 elements this author has changed. Let's read the rest of it and then you're going to have time to record. So the big bad shark munched and he crunched and he ate up every bit of the seaweed house. And Jim swam away just in time. My microphone has been sitting in my lap, so I hope you've been able to hear me. Soon Jim found his brother. Tim said, "Don't worry, Jim. We fish stick together. You can help me build a sandy little house." Jim and Tim had just started to relax in the sandy little house, when the big bad shark came knocking at the door. Little fish, let me come in." To which the brave little fish replied, "Not by the skin of my finny fin. Then I'll munch and I'll crunch and I'll smash your house in," roared the shark. So the big bad shark munched and he crunched until he got a sandy mouthful and the house crumbled. Jim and Tim swam and swam. Until they reached their sister, Kim. Kim was setting up her house in an old wooden ship. "The big bad shark destroyed our houses." "Don't worry, you can live with me," said Kim. And they did. So pause here, turn and talk. What are your predictions? We've seen all the first 4 elements of the story so far. Now think about that ending. How might this story end? Will it end similarly to the ones we read before? Talk about that, and when you're ready, come on back. So by now you're coming back after talking together about what might happen at the end of this story. So let's read and find out. The 3 little fish had just finished lunch when they heard the big bad shark knocking at their door. Little fish, let me come in." To which the smart fish replied, "Not by the skin of my finny fin. Then I'll munch and I'll crunch and I'll smash your house in," roared the shark. The big bad shark munched and he crunched, but he could not smash the house in. And all his teeth fell out. The 3 little fish were safe at last. Look at the shark here. Where is it? So now we have finished our third version of the Three Little Pigs. Take a minute together and fill in this chart because I'm going to come back and go over it with you. So make sure you've done it so that you do that thinking without me showing it to you. So by now, hopefully you have filled in this chart. You've written down what the characters were, the setting, and let's go over that together. So in this story, The Three Little Fish and the Big Bad Shark, the characters were three fish and a shark, right? Like it says in the title. The setting was, the ocean. Sorry, there's something on the screen. The materials for the three houses, they didn't use straw, sticks, and bricks. This time they used seaweed, sandcastle, and a sunken ship or a shipwreck. The language, they changed the language from the original story a little bit, right? They still said, let me come in, but now the fish said, not by the skin of my finny fin fin, right? They have fins on their body that are covered in skin. So they said, not by the skin of my finny fin fin, instead of not by the hair on my chinny chin chin. Then the wolf, instead of saying, I'll huff and I'll puff, the shark said, I'll munch and I'll crunch, right? So they took it and changed it a little bit. And what about that ending? In this one, the wolf didn't fall in a pot. He didn't end up in jail. All his teeth fell out because he tried to bite a shipwreck. So that was a very creative version of the Three Little Pigs. So now the last thing I'm going to leave you with is to turn and talk together. Did you like this version? Why or why not? What did you think about how this author, Ken Geist, took that story and flipped it around? Thanks for joining me for lesson number 10, I think. I'm losing track. Join me again for lesson 11, which is going to be the fourth and almost last Three Pigs story. Bye.